You're watching HuffPost Live. I'm Alicia Menendez. LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. Should we add another Q for questioning? Why is it so hard to find a common language for sexual orientation and gender identity? Even allies can find this alphabet soup unnerving and fear misusing these terms. For those who identify along a sexual or gender spectrum, the constant explaining, it can be tedious and tiresome. But it's critical to reaching a place of understanding. Joining us to discuss, we have Mitchell Williams. He's a HuffPost Live producer. Noah Michelson, editor of HuffPost Gay Voices. And in our Google Hangout, we have Ash McGovern, a student at Cornell University Law School, Holly Cashman, associate professor of Spanish linguistics at the University of New Hampshire, and Tony Newman, community editor at proudtobeout.org. Great group. Thanks for being here.
Let's do it.
So we've been talking about this for a long time.
We have.
And we were nervous putting this together. I'm more nervous about this segment than I've been about most.
Yeah, I think like with this segment, we were running the risk of being one of those shows where five gays sit around a straight girl and tell her what bottoming is all about, or, definitions between us or how it works. And so when we were coming up with this segment, I think that we just really wanted to be careful about, what we said, what we did, and just to not label ourselves as like that top layer entertainment conversation.
And to also give ourselves enough space to have an honest conversation.
Right, because it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Right, and there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions. I mean, already our comment wall is blowing up. We have Xavier Santana saying, oh man, so many rules. Can I just accept you as a human being, recognize your rights, and call you by your name? Is it that enough? It's not enough, Noah.
It's not enough. We're still not at a place, I think people like to think we're at this kind of post-gay or post-queer world. It's not the truth. I think there's a huge power in people identifying themselves and each other as part of a minority group. And to say that you're gay, or to say that you are trans, or to say that you're queer, it helps you find other people who are like you, and it's a rallying point, I think. I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Professor Cashman, you study language. You know how important this all is.
Yes, I mean, I obviously think language is important because that's what I research, but we tend to think of language as reflecting a social reality that is just out there, and the truth is more complicated than that language creates and constructs a social reality as we interact with people. So we do have to think about what we say and what we mean when we say what we say, and what identities we're constructing for others and for ourselves when we interact, because we're creating that social structure through our interaction.
And in order to have this conversation, I do want to walk through all of these letters and talk about what the working definition of each of these letters are. I think people sort of get through lesbian and gay and then get very confused as we move into some of the other letters. So I would love to hear, Holly, if someone asks you for a definition of what it means to be a lesbian, what is the definition you give them?
Wow, okay, so...
No pressure at all.
As the key lesbian.
I can honestly say that I don't think anyone ever has. I don't think people are as uncomfortable or confused about what gay and lesbian are as much as they are kind of all the other letters in the LGBTQIAP, collection. And I think that it would be different for almost every person that you ask. I would say it has to do with attraction, whether it's emotional, whether it's sexual, whether it's of any other kind, to another woman. I mean, as a basic kind of 2-second definition.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because I know that definition could go on for a very long time.
It's interesting too, because you can be a lesbian, or something can be lesbian. You can have a lesbian attraction and not identify as a lesbian. And so it gets even more complicated then too, because I think being gay, I consider myself gay. I live a gay life.
Which you define as?
As I am interested in having relationships and sex with other men. But there are men who sleep with other men and are married to women and are happy being married to women.
And a lot of them live in Hollywood.
Exactly. Or are trolling the steam rooms at, the gyms.
Trust.
So they wouldn't say they're gay, but they are having gay sex. You know what I mean? So even breaking it down between a noun, an adjective, a verb, gets
But
even more
Do
complicated.
you really think that bringing up a group like married men who have sex in steam rooms and then return to their wives actually like applies to like what we're saying here? Because a lot of people, and I don't want to go off on a tangent,
Yeah.
but like when you have a married guy who is having sex with men, you know, as a gay man, I'm like, okay, well, give him a couple years, and then after his marriage falls apart, he'll be on the market. So, I mean, is it fair to kind of incorporate that group? I mean, there's one thing to say that you're bisexual, it's another to say that you're married and you're picking up men while your wife is at home taking care of your kids.
Right. I wouldn't say that those people are part of the queer community per se, but I would
hope
say
not.
their actions are gay.
Right.
What they're doing is gay, whether or not they want to identify that way.
Right.
Or bisexual, but the sex they're having is gay sex.
Sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of bisexual, I want to bring up this comment from Mary, who says bisexual people receive just as much discrimination as the other alternative orientations, if not more so, since both gays and straights spurn them. But all these groups receive discrimination due to the labels we instill on people, even heterosexuals. And bisexuals are often sort of the missing letter. And we were talking with one of our producers who identifies as being queer, and she has been with both men and women, but finds that bisexual is no longer a term that's really useful to her. And she was very honest about the fact that happens to be a college-educated, upper middle class sect of the population, but that bisexual as a word she felt was losing steam. Do you see that at all with your readers?
I know, actually, the opposite almost. I would say our bisexual readers are some of the most vocal readers that we have, and I think that is because they're so often invisible and they have to sort of stand up and say, no, wait a second, we're here. And our sort of approaches to things and our, you know, what is a priority for us is different than other people in the queer community. So I think it's still a huge thing for them.
Yeah. Now, as we move down the letters, Tony, I would love to hear how you explain to someone in your family what it means to be transgender.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because there's a difference. I get offended myself as a trans woman to be called gay. I am dealing with gender, so I prefer to be called transgender, which is the T of the LGBT. And that's more of a gender thing than sexual orientation. And that's where I find my family and friends and associates, people that I go to law school with, get confused. They just say, Tony is gay. Well, you know, I have been on hormones for 7 years, therapy, and all these other things, which deals more with gender than with sexual orientation, because transgenders on a wide range go with women, men, other transgenders. So that's sexual orientation. So for me, I prefer to be called transgender, and that is someone who feels that they were born in the wrong body, and then now they're trying to correct that and go to the right body. It's the simplest way I can explain it.
Yeah, and this is always the concept. I've seen many Oprah episodes where explaining what it means to be transgender.
Right.
And how that relates to sexual orientation. Like I remember this great episode where there was a man who'd become a woman and was still married to his wife, and Oprah says to the wife, well, you're a lesbian now. And she's like, well, no, I'm just married to this person.
Right.
And it blew her mind.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if it is complicated to have letters and identities related to gender identity connected to letters that are supposed to deal with sexual orientation.
Exactly. My point. You hit it. That's my point exactly.
Well,
There's a difference.
Yeah, they are different. So how do you feel as someone who is T being looped in with the L and the G and the B?
How am I different, you said?
I want to know how you feel about it, how you feel about having an umbrella term.
I work for Equality California and California here. We're fighting for LGBT rights. I love that the T is included in the equality fight, because the GLBT are the only ones that would take up the cause of the transgender, but we are dealing more with gender when you come into the sexual orientation of the L, the G, and the B, than they are. They don't transform, do body transformations, so that's the difference. I'm glad to be included in the LGBT for the equality fight. I work for the equality fight. I love that we're included on that realm of equality. But when it comes to sexual orientation and gender, there should be a difference between what's gay and what's transgender. And I think that's where the confusion lies with a lot of American regular folk that I meet walking the street. They think are you a homosexual? Are you gay? Well, you have a body like a female. I'm confused. So I explained to them I'm in the wrong body, and I moved over because I was once a guy, and now I'm a woman. And it is difficult, but that's gender, not sex.
Yeah, and Tony, you recognize, right, the courage it probably takes someone to ask you that.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I am after 20 years of this fight, the anger is gone. I'm very laid back. Knowledge is power. And I think, when they see me and they work with me, they realize that Tony is a transgender, and they call me that as they get to know me. So, I try to present it in a way that it's not about sex with us. It's more about transformation and going to the right body. It's not about who we sleep with, how we're labeled. That's not the key with the transgenders, because they go in the wide. Some transgenders like guys, some like females, some like other transgenders. I know them that like all types. It's more about gender identity with us, and that's what I like to teach and tell people.
Right.
I was going to say the other interesting thing too is that there's also some transgender people who don't feel they were born in the wrong body per se, but aren't interested in any gender, who fit in the middle of the spectrum and say, I'm not a man or a woman, and I'm totally happy to live that way. And that blows people's mind even more. And so, they get to a point where they're like, okay, I kind of get the transgender thing, but then you say, no, this person doesn't even want you to use any pronoun to refer to them. And so it's so complicated, but also amazing.
Ash, I want to bring you in here because we have to get to this final letter, Q, and I would love to hear what your working definition of Q is.
Okay, so I guess this is a complicated one, but the way I try to explain it is that it's sort of a non-binary identity. So what I mean by that is in gender and sexual orientation, often we set things up in sort of a binary way, which is a system of two. So gay, straight, male, female. But genderqueer, which is how I identify, is a gender identity that's not maybe outside of both of those categories, a combination of some of those categories. And it depends on who you're talking to, how they personally define. So that's genderqueer. And then queer is sort of the same thing for sexual orientation. It's either a combination of attraction to men, women, other genderqueer people, gender nonconforming people, or some combination of different things. But yeah, that's my best definition, I guess, of queer.
That was a great definition. Ash, how often do you run into someone who thinks the term queer is pejorative, who's afraid of using it?
When I was in college in particular, I think around activism, this was a big issue because it's still a pejorative term. It's still a term that some people use to be offensive to other people, but I think for me, it best encapsulates how I view my identity. And I think there's a lot of effort for queer folks to be reclaiming that word and reclaiming that identity to be something positive as opposed to negative. But I know it's still difficult for some people to grapple with.
Yeah, we have a community member who has sent in a video comment who wants to weigh in on that. This is from Maurice Lucas. Let's take a listen.
Okay, so I had to submit a video because I love this topic. I get that it can be all confusing because I swear I went from being questioning to gay to I'm just a human, I'm just me, to like being queer to being blood queer, which is a black queer to me. But I think what we're also missing is, besides being all confusing, there's power in trying to name yourself, especially when we consider the fact that most of us who are gay were first named and labeled by someone else. So if we can stand up and say that I am queer, or I am gay, or I am this, and this is why, and this is what this means, there's power in that. And I think, I don't know, I just don't really worry too much about like how difficult it is for people not in my community to like figure out what it all means, because I'll be happy to tell you what it means to me. So yeah, I just think we should embrace the power it gives us.
It is so awesome to see you, Maurice, after seeing your name in the comment well so often. And I agree, there is power in that, in being very specific, but there's also power in having an umbrella term. I mean, we're still talking about a fraction of the population, and to be able to